Welcome, my friends, to the Bob and Brad podcast, produced by Bob and Brad, the two most famous physical therapists on the internet. I am Bob, and I'm exactly one half of the Bob and Brad team. Today, my guest is Patrick McKeown, who is, I'm just going to put it very simply because he does go over his background. He is the expert on breathing. And you think, oh, I know how to breathe. I'm breathing, I'm alive. You're going to be amazed at how it can affect your life as far as anxiety and sleep and digestion. And I mean, it just goes on and on. The how it affects your health if you're doing it improperly. And most of us are. And I have been on this journey for at least a year now in trying to improve my breathing. And I have a ways to go, but it has made a big effect, has had a big effect on my life. Welcome to the program, Patrick McKeown.
Thanks very much, Bob. Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. Again, as I was mentioning to you off screen here, really a topic of interest of mine is breathing. Really, I want to talk about how breathing exercises can help anxiety per se. I mean, obviously, It makes sense. You can slow down the sympathetic nervous system, and that's going to tell your body that you're no longer in fight or flight, and you're going to relax. So
yes. There's a few aspects to it. For any person with anxiety and depression and PTSD and panic disorder, the first thing that I would say is look at your sleep quality. That's by far the most important thing. However, your quality of sleep is going to be influenced by how you breathe during sleep. Now, if I read any books on sleep, we'll be hearing, don't be looking into your screens late at night.
Right.
Don't be eating food. Don't be drinking alcohol. Make sure your bedroom is cool. Make sure there's no sound, etc. All good stuff, but it has missed the elephant in the room.
Right.
And the elephant in the room is the importance of breathing in and out through the nose. There is very little research on the incidence of mouth breathing in the adult population. My own experience working with groups of people over the years, it's likely to be about 50%. That 50% of people, adults, are waking up with a dry mouth in the morning. They're not going to wake up feeling refreshed. Now, any of us will have a bad night's sleep every now and again. That's normal. And sleep disorder breathing is something that we do experience as we get older, whether it's insomnia or snoring or obstructive sleep apnea. In terms of mental health, I don't think we can ever address mental health unless we get sleep quality right first.
I agree. 100%.
That's number one.
Yes.
But how many psychologists are looking at this? How many psychiatrists and counselors, and cognitive behavioral therapy, etc. All of that stuff is really, really good. But what if the person is having lousy sleep and sleep disorder breathing? Naturally, their physiology is going to be in that increased sympathetic drive. And how can we be productive? Life in terms of the demands on the adult, rearing a family, looking after the family home, the corporate work, whatever you have to do, it's demanding. We cannot function if we have poor sleep. Our productivity is reduced, our attention span is reduced, our concentration is reduced, and our anxiety is going to increase.
Yes, absolutely.
So coming in with sleep then is not just enough to breathe through your nose. It's not just enough to tape up the mouth. And it's not that everybody needs to wear tape across their lips. No. It's only those people who are waking up with a dry mouth in the morning. We also should be practicing light breathing for about 10 to 15 minutes before sleep. And this is when the individual is sitting there, put one hand on the chest and one hand just above the navel, and really slow down the speed of the breath as it comes into your nose, almost that your breathing is so quiet that you feel hardly any air. And then a really relaxed and slow, gentle breath out. And even just keep it at that. How can you soften your breathing to the point that you feel a tolerable air hunger? So you're doing it correctly when you would like to take in more air. And look to maintain that feeling of a tolerable air hunger for about 10 or 15 minutes. That will help you to down-regulate. You'll feel the increased watery saliva in the mouth, but you will also feel sleepy. It's very good for people who have insomnia, but also snoring and also obstructive sleep apnea. Now, when you breathe slowly, there's less negative pressure in the airways as well. You know, like if I was to give you this example here, I often say to my students and say, make the sound of a snore through the mouth. And they will go like this. And then I will say, close your mouth and try and snore through your mouth. You can't.
Do it.
You can't snore through your mouth when your mouth is closed. Now you could make the sound of a snore through your nose, and it goes like this. Mm-hmm. So nasal snoring is when there's turbulence in the nasopharynx. Nasal snoring is not just because of the size of the nasal airway. It's influenced by flow of breathing. And if you have an individual who is breathing a little bit faster and harder during the day, they will have harder and faster breathing during sleep. And this generates more turbulence in the nasal airway. Now, when snoring gets severe to the point that the airways collapse during sleep, now you have obstructive sleep apnea. And this in turn, when obstructive sleep apnea and insomnia goes together, depression rates the risk of depression is much higher. So even from a breathing perspective, when you breathe through your nose with your tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, and when you have light, slow, and low breathing, because with obstructive sleep apnea, there is a set of muscles in the throat which are designed to help maintain an open airway. But these muscles are mechanically linked to the diaphragm. Now you think of, I'm going to target here a 50-year-old man who's drinking a few pints of beer every weekend. He's got a bit of weight in his belly. He has a sedentary lifestyle. You're kind of normal Western individual. He's going to sleep at night. He has his mouth open. He's breathing hard and fast. He's activating the upper chest. His airway is collapsing. And we can help in terms of, with better recruitment of the diaphragm, lighter breathing, slower breathing, there's less resistance to breathing during sleep. And with that, we can target the 4 characteristics of sleep apnea. Now, I'll move on to your question on anxiety. So when we think of, when I have somebody breathe light, as anybody can practice it, it increases blood flow and oxygen delivery to the brain. This has a calming effect on the central nervous system. But also, when I have them breathe light, I'm exposing them to a tolerable air hunger or suffocation. This is designed also to help to desensitize their body's reaction to the feeling of suffocation. It's very relevant to people with anxiety. But when I'm starting off with somebody with anxiety, I typically will have the air hunger for only about 30 seconds. Then I take a rest for a minute. And then I have them do air hunger for about 30 seconds. In other words, I give them a teaspoon of air hunger so that their body, so that they can kind of not surrender to it, but to feel it, and just to realize that air hunger is something that you experience if you go for a walk or whatever.
Sure.
So from a biochemical point of view, we improve blood flow and oxygen delivery to the brain, but we also desensitize the person's reaction to suffocation. Number 2, we work on the diaphragm because of the connection between the diaphragm and the emotions. And nose breathing is better connected with the diaphragm than mouth breathing. I'll always say to my students, I say, look at your breathing. And when you see people with anxiety coming in, 75% of the anxiety population have dysfunctional breathing. 75%. It is the population with the highest incidence of dysfunctional breathing across all sectors. Look at their breathing. You will see generally faster breathing. So the respiratory rate could be 16 plus breaths per minute. You will see upper chest breathing. You will see irregular breathing patterns. They may be, for example, breathing in and holding their breath. They may be sighing, for example. You'll see mouth breathing during sleep, mouth breathing during distraction. And this in turn is feeding into the anxiety, because it's not just that the stress and anxiety is changing our breathing patterns. Of course, our breathing changes when we get into a difficult situation. However, if we are breathing with dysfunctional breathing, we are feeding into that anxiety and stress continuously. So from a biomechanical point of view, it's very important to breathe through your nose and with better recruitment of the diaphragm. And as I said, I ask my students often to look down at their chest and take a breath through the mouth. And when you breathe through your mouth, you will typically see that you engage the upper chest. Now, I have to say this because there are so many disciplines which focus on improving recruitment of the diaphragm, but they don't encourage their students to breathe in and out through the nose. I don't think we're going to get a long-term success in terms of activating the diaphragm muscle, and of course, every breath that we take, we are using the diaphragm, but the key is the degrees to which we are using it. And then from a resonance frequency point of view, slowing down the respiratory rate down to that between 4.5 and 6.5 breaths per minute. But oftentimes I will start off just to slow down the respiratory rate to 10 breaths per minute. I will have the student breathe in gently for 3 seconds and out for 3, and in for 3 and out for 3. And the reason that I want to bring in that kind of regular breathing pattern is because very often they have irregular breathing. And I want them to practice breathing regular according to a time, almost that we want to change the software in the brain, that we want to change the habit of breathing. Then I do, different tools, like in terms of panic disorder coming in, and I would have people that maybe breathe in and out through the nose, hold their nose, and just walk 5 paces holding the breath, because we can increase blood flow to the brain that way. Relaxation, humming, because it helps to stimulate the vagus nerve as well, and good sleep. So I think from an anxiety and a mental health point of view, it's not just about taking these full big breaths. It's really for the instructor. And I would love to see the day that yoga instructors knew about the 3 dimensions of breathing, because you can imagine all of the people who attend yoga for anxiety. And if that instructor could gently soften the breathing patterns and expose their students to increased carbon dioxide, because when you expose your body to increased carbon dioxide, it improves your tolerance of CO2. With an improved tolerance of CO2, your breathing naturally becomes slower. When your breathing is naturally slower, when you have control over the breath, you have more control over the mind. So for the yoga instructor to talk about breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, to look at the biochemistry of breathing, look at the biomechanics, bring in resonance frequency breathing, but more importantly, show your students how they should be breathing when they leave the studio. How do you breathe when you walk down the street? How do you breathe when you get into that tricky situation? Should you respond with hyperventilation? Because all it takes is 90 seconds to help dampen the stress response. And there's more to this, because, I'll give you an example. I work with elite military.
Mm-hmm.
In a number of different countries, I've worked with elite military. One group that I'm due to go back to work with them is in March. And I work solely with snipers with this group.
Sure.
I'm brought in how to breathe in order to improve accuracy of a shot. And this is simply just knowing normal physiology. So when I was first given this task, I was thinking, well, because I haven't a clue about guns, to be honest with you. I shot a shotgun about 15 years ago once from your Iraq clay pigeon. So it's something that I know absolutely nothing of. But I was thinking about, how could you breathe in terms of the autonomic nervous system? When is the right time to pull the trigger? Would you pull the trigger when you're inhaling? Or would you breathe in and hold your breath and pull the trigger? Or would you breathe in, breathe out, and then pull the trigger? Or would you breathe in and have a slow breath out and pull the trigger during the slow breath out? The time to pull the trigger is in between your heartbeats.
I had read that years ago, that people, they wanted 60 beats per minute. They have a full second to take the squeeze of the trigger.
And so the key is, how can we slow down the heart? During the inhalation, the heartbeat speeds up. So that's not the time to pull the trigger. During the exhalation, and especially if you can have a slow and prolonged exhalation, that's primarily under the control of the body's relaxation response. You pull the trigger towards the bottom of the exhalation and you breathe into the shot. Because
Gotcha.
when you have a slow and relaxed exhalation, you can slow down your heart rate, which gives you more time between beats to pull the trigger. But what's more, if these individuals have a high bolt score of 40 seconds is what we look for with elite
Sure.
athletes, military, etc., they will naturally have a slow respiratory rate, but also naturally have a lower heart rate.
Yeah, it's funny. They were just talking about Stephen Curry. He's a point guard, and he just set the record for 3-point shots, making 3-point shots. And his heart rate, they said one of the main reasons he's able to keep his heart rate down below 80 beats per minute and keep calm when he's shooting. It doesn't affect his shot as much. So
Yeah.
I got to ask you this. People are going to get information from your books. If they want further training, though, is there some place they can go? I mean,
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Like we do instructor training pretty much every 6 weeks. Now we're doing it all virtually via Zoom, which it works pretty well. For Oxygen Advantage instructor training, it's on oxygenadvantage.com.
So you're only instructing instructors, or you're instructing?
No, we have everybody.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah. So we teach people to become instructors, but I also then give classes every 4 or 5 weeks for people coming in with asthma or respiratory issues, sleep disorder breathing, anxiety and panic disorder. So I give 2-hour classes as well. They cost $50 for the 2 hours, so they're not very expensive.
No, not at all.
And it's a small group of people now. It's about 20 people. And you'll see those classes on buteyko.clinic.com. So that's BUTEYKO clinic.com. And if you go to, I think it's Learn It, and then you'll see the Zoom classes. So I think they'll happen again in January.
Great. I actually have somebody I want to go through this. And I'm keeping you over here, but I'm going to ask one more question.
Sure, of course.
You mentioned the IBS, and I have a friend who is having problems with this, and I know her breathing is terrible. I mean, it's one of the things that was very obvious to me, and it makes sense to me that your body's not able to digest food as well because you're in a state of anxiety. So, I mean, do you see that as fairly common effect of that is IBS or something along that line?
I've never put it out there for IBS, but any person that I've seen come in with IBS, but they might be coming in with asthma and IBS, for example.
Sure.
That the feedback that I've got was that it was positive. I can't say, because I haven't worked with enough people with IBS, is it 100%.
Right.
But I have seen that irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel syndrome, it is listed as a symptom of chronic hyperventilation syndrome.
Sure.
And chronic hyperventilation syndrome, it often originates as a result of either long-term stress or like chronic stress. I think it's really worth, when you see somebody with dysfunctional breathing and they have a pre-existing condition, it's very important to at least address their dysfunctional breathing.
Yes.
Now, oftentimes when I don't know, I'd often say to the student, does stress make your situation worse? And if they tell me yes, well, I tell them that what I'm going to do is I'm hoping to give you the tools for you to dampen your stress response and for you to be better able to handle stress, and changing the physiology, getting that balance in the autonomic nervous system. And by doing that, we can help the condition, because we know inflammation is made worse by chronic stress. This is known since 1998, when a neuroscientist called Kevin Tracy, I think he was in New York, he was doing experiments on rats. And he found that if he could stimulate the vagus nerve, he could abate inflammation in the rat. He then
Wow.
went on, he tested this in human beings and with people with rheumatoid arthritis with, I think it was electronic stimulation of the vagus nerve. But if you put in Kevin Tracy, Treacy, and put it into Google, and you'll see the work there. So there's definitely a connection between the vagus nerve and inflammation. And then we have to ask, well, could there be more potential here? Because so many conditions associated with inflammation, should those individuals also be gave some tools to help alleviate stress in their life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you mentioned there also earlier, diet definitely is
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
So again, I want to be very respectful of your time. Patrick McKeown, thank you so much. Again, check out his work at oxygenadvantage.com. And he's got many books. Is there one book you would recommend for the beginner, or is it depending on what they're into?
I've got a new one out. It's called Atomic Focus.
Oh,
it's the most simplest one in terms of people who want to change states.
sure.
I think the Breathing Cure, I like the book, but I would say it mightn't be everybody's read because it's a little bit technical. But if you were to read the first 2 chapters, you'll get everything in the first 2 chapters. The first 100 pages contains 26 different exercises. And it delves, I suppose, women's breathing, Bob, which has been overlooked, the symptoms of PMS,
Sure.
Helping people with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. And there's a good lot of research that came out of Italy over the last 20 years on that. Epilepsy, giving people some forms of epilepsy are brought on by, some seizures are brought on by hyperventilation. Asthma, sleep apnea, children's development. So I suppose if people want sports performance, it would be the Oxygen Advantage.
Yes.
If you want to delve into health, it's going to be the Breathing Cure. And if you want to delve into improving concentration and focus and attention span, it's the book Atomic Focus.
And I'll tell you, I just, as a personal testimony, this is not hyperbole. I mean, it's crazy how much breathing can change your life and your health. So thanks again, Patrick McKeown, for being on. Love to have you anytime. And again, make sure you check out his books and his website. We'll have down below too listed. So thanks everybody for listening.
Pleasure. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.